We already knew that Evergrande is going to bankrupt 1 year ago. Yes, 1 year. Hi guys, it's Eric from Hong Kong based in Germany. I've been investing since I was 17 years old for almost 20 years. I want to give you guys alternative perspective about investments related to Asia. Today I'm going to talk about the true story about Evergrande. Why does it matter to you and I? And is it going to be the next Lehman Brothers? Evergrande also exposed a huge risk to the global financial market, which I'm going to talk about in the next video. So who's Evergrande? It is the second biggest real estate developer in China by sales. It owes $300 billion to bondholders, to banks, and to suppliers, and owes $6 billion to retail investors who invest in their retail wealth products. But even more staggering is that there are 1.6 million flats already paid for, but they haven't delivered yet. So what's the trigger of the crisis? Evergrande default on a bond that is $84 million offshore, which means outside of mainland China, on the 23rd of September. On the same day, they almost also default with an onshore bond which worth around $34 million. But luckily they resolved it last minute without disclosing the details. But that's not a surprise because Evergrande's business model is basically a Ponzi scheme 28 years in the making. What they did was they borrow a lot of money, they buy land at high price, and then build the houses very quickly and then sell them very quickly, so that the sales revenue can go back to cover the loans, and then the whole cycle repeats itself. But the problem is that the growth cannot go on forever, because at some stage there will be less people buying, and that means there will be less sales revenue in order to cover the lending they have received from the banks. So this is a musical chair. It is a matter of time that this whole cycle, at least one part of that would break and the whole thing would be disrupted. And of course this happened when last year the Chinese government issued the 3 red lines, basically to limit the borrowing of real estate companies in order to rein in the real estate bubbles in China. And of course, Evergrande is in trouble alongside with many other real estate companies in China. This is basically a death sentence for Evergrande. Why? Because they're not allowed to borrow more money. They cannot buy land, build houses, and sell. Even worse still is that sales also plummet after the crackdown. Without the sales revenue, they cannot pay back the loans. This is really, really bad. This will be the biggest restructuring in Chinese financial history. So what are the implications? The immediate ones, of course, is to the banks, to the debt holders, shareholders, suppliers, construction companies, etc. And then the 80,000 retail investors into the wealth products, the 200,000 employees, but even more importantly is that the 1.6 million people who bought flats with them already paid but not yet delivered. One more time bomb is that the local governments, because they rely on land sales and they will not get the revenue to cover their costs. Well, so why does it matter to you and I, right? The broader implication is that the real estate industry is stupid. You know, the price would go down or the government control the price and there would be no transaction. In any case, the real estate bubble would burst. You need to know that it counts for almost 30% of GDP of China. Also, it counts for 28% of the GDP growth globally. So you can imagine how big the impact would be on the global economy and even global financial crisis. So by the way, if you're new to this topic, check out the link above or in the description to my channel so that you have background information. Even better if you subscribe and click the bell button next to the subscribe button so that you're not going to miss out my analysis. Okay, back to the topic. So will this be the next Lehman Brothers moment? Just like the financial crisis back in 2008. Well, first of all, you need to know that even I myself knew that they're going to collapse 1 year ago. Of course, the Chinese government knew it. And if they allowed default to happen, that means this is a deliberate attempt to burst the real estate bubble in China. So what's likely to happen then? Of course, the debt investors, stock investors will have big losses, and the suppliers probably need to endure some pains. According to Barclays, debt investors probably would be lucky if they get 40 to 45% back from the capital. For banks, they need to basically absorb the loans into their balance sheet. This is the best way than the financial crisis. So how about the retail investors and employees? Well, there are only 80,000 retail investors. By Chinese standards, a very small number. It costs around $6.2 billion, which could be easily absorbed by some state-owned company who would take over. Same for employee. It's not a small number, of course, 200,000 employees, but most of them probably will keep their job even though Evergrande will be taken over. There will still be construction work for the new flats, so I'm not too worried about that. So how about home buyers? This is more interesting because it involves 1.6 million buyers, which means several million people are affected. This is about social stability. Of course, the Chinese government will intervene. In fact, they issued an order to local governments a few days ago, making sure that these buyers would be taken care of with all kinds of measures, whatever means it is, and also if any riots, they need to be dealt with swiftly. So the Chinese government for sure is not going to let this collapse. So how about the local governments? They rely a lot on land sales to cover their shortfall in revenue. Well, this is a big topic we need to talk in a separate video. So far, there's very little sign of public intervention by the Chinese government. The closest thing was that the Chinese central bank injected 110 billion RMB into market as the same day as Evergrande's default. So let's see what they're going to do. The most likely scenario is that they might end up like HRHFinance Group, the mother company of Hainan Airways. They rack up a huge amount of debt by having a spending spree, investing all around the world, expensive properties, and even buying big companies. They were being taken over, restructured, and being divided into 4 different companies. However, this is not the Lehman Brothers moment yet. The main difference is that in 2008, the crisis was triggered by the fact that all banks are not allowing money to flow to each other. That's why the liquidity dried up. But for this case, Chinese government can simply order all the banks to keep on lending to each other. So there's no such problem as financial crisis. Even though Evergrande is not the Lehman Brothers yet, it doesn't mean that crisis averted. Evergrande revealed the situation of Chinese real estate bubbles. And you need to understand real estate counts for 30% of GDP of China, and China's growth counts for 28% worldwide. So this is a big problem, and I'm going to cover it in a separate video. Do you think that Evergrande is going to trigger the Lehman Brothers moment? Do you want me to further deep dive into the real estate crisis in China? Leave me in the comments below. If you like the video, remember like, share, and subscribe. Even better, clicking the bell button next to the subscribe button so that you're not going to miss out. It will be a great motivation for me so that I continue making better videos for you guys.